we are very excited that this panel discussion is going to, like Suchi says, unpanel the panel. So yeah, thank you very much, Suchi, for doing this. 3.5 years ago, when we started, I think it started with reimagining the state nation project with Chennai Photo Biennale and Photo Gallery. And I think we've come a long way as partners, forming trust-based relationships with both Photo Gallery as well as the Chennai Photo Biennale Foundation. And we are also very happy that this is not just a showcase that is happening in TKM Warehouse, but there's lots of other activities like the 2 panels today, but also working with educators as part of the outreach program that you do, Suchi. I think it's wonderful to be able to reach unreached audiences and to have a wider conversation. So from the British Council, we are very, very delighted that we are here today along with you all to experience and re-experience communities of choice. The festival, just to give you an understanding of the season of culture that we're putting together, the Season of Culture is a 10-month-long program. It's a collaboration between 1,400 artists in India and the UK. It spans 21 cities across India. We're delighted that in the south, we've been able to program in Kochi, in Chennai, and in Bangalore. So a lot of the programs in the south have been taking place there. And of course, all the other cities across India. And as we speak, we have in Ahmedabad the Future Flow project, as well as the Govandi Festival in Maharashtra, which is going on. And one interesting partnership during the Season of Culture has been with the Ministry of Culture in India. We launched a Festivals from India website. It's also got an Instagram handle, so check it out, because it kind of gives you your festival fix wherever, whichever part of India you are in, you will find something to do and something to watch or something to experience. So we're very, very happy that that partnership has come through during this wonderful Invite 75 year for us as well. So we are looking at an estimated reach of, I think, 100 million people through the festival, because we're also looking at ways to collaborate digitally and fidgetally. I learned a new word that day. So somebody said, is it a phygital event? And I was like, okay, it's physical and digital. Thank you very much for teaching me a new word. But we're also equally delighted. I mean, sad that Tarun and Sebastian can't join us here today, but we're absolutely delighted that you're able to join us virtually thanks to technology and some lessons from COVID that we've learned, but delighted that you're able to join us online and participate in this wonderful conversation and panel discussion. And finally, a big shout out to all the audiences of Kochi Biennale and those of you who come here to join us today in person. Thank you all so much for being encouraging, supportive, and I think building a resilient world which is completely cemented by arts and culture. So we're very happy to welcome you all here. And I'm going to hand over to Suchi at this point to introduce the panel and to take this discussion forward. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Janika. Thank you all for joining us this evening. As Janika mentioned, that we have a wonderful showcase that's currently on called Communities of Choice. And I'm delighted to have all our artists here, barring two of them who are there up on screen, which is Sebastian, who's joined us from Wales, and Tarun, who's joining us from Shillong. Our whole idea of this panel was not to just have an us and them approach. The whole idea was that if we are a community, then maybe this should be a conversation with a community sitting together. And one of the core terms that Janika mentioned is the question of togetherness. And that's why we thought about the whole idea of unpaneling the panel, because usually you have the speakers up on stage, the artists up on stage, and the audience sitting across. But we wanted to sort of disrupt that. And we wanted to make sure that all of us are sitting together and having this as a conversation, as a discussion, where we do invite each of you to comment and participate. So if any of you at any point would like to maybe say something, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mic over to you at any point in the conversation. Do not hesitate. And with that note, maybe Janika, you wanted to start with giving the small token to the artists. Yeah, can you help, please? Sebastian. Okay, so without much further delay, sorry, already there's been a lot of delay in getting started. One of the quick questions that we asked through this project is where do and the sense of belonging and identity is something that we are urging each one of you to think about, because while they might seem quite intertwined, but they're two very different things. And a lot of the works in our show are representative of that, because you could that community really accepting you? Is that country accepting you? What about the people who migrate forcibly or out of choice? Also, do you have a choice when you want to belong to a community? Because there are certain identities that are given to you at birth by your parents, by your family. You develop friendships along the course. And then you choose certain other communities that you want to be part of. And today, one of the core questions is that some of us have that privilege to choose, whereas some of us don't. And on that note, I would like to kind of introduce some of the basic, just in a very short summary, some of the works that we will be discussing today. Palini Kumar here, who's from Chennai, his work is largely on the community of manual scavenging, people who do this work. He's been documenting them for many years, and it's a question of human rights as well as where is their identity in the process, right? So that's one work that we will be talking about. Parivartana Mohanty, who's here with us, who's currently based in Delhi, but otherwise from Orissa. His work is based out of that region. His work focuses on a particular community called Mulias, who continue to get displaced because of erosion and because of climate change, but they also belong to a particular caste, which makes it very difficult for them to find a sense of belonging somewhere else, because they're constantly being moved to different fringes. So I just want to set the context of all the works that we will be discussing. I have with me here Dipandita Saha, who's from Kolkata, whose work is about the Calcutta killings around the India-Pakistan partition, because we only know of the partition as being between India and Pakistan, focusing on Delhi, focusing on Punjab, but we don't look at a lot of the impact that might have happened from other migrants who were already present in India or were migrating to India around that same period. So her work we will discuss on that theme with Sebastian Bustamante, who's from Wales. He himself, it's almost like a personal journey from him, because his family migrated. In fact, it was almost like an exodus. They moved from Chile to UK, and he has done work of documenting not just his own family archives and what it meant to belong as his personal response, but also other community members that he went and found and got their testimonies in the process. And we have Tarun Bharti, who is joining us from Shillong. This is one very interesting work that touches both India and Wales. When he was visiting, he's from this region called Khasi Jaintia Hills. And when he visited Wales and one of the churches in Aberystwyth in Wales, he saw these postcards which were from the Khasi Jaintia Hills, and he wondered what was going here. So this work actually talks about faith, which is a big question in India at this moment and in many other parts of the world, especially which are based on religion, where religion is the core premise of your faith. And that's where he has made a work called the Postcard Project, where he has not only discovered a lot of archives of the colonizers who had come or the missionaries who had come at that point, and maybe they had made some pictures of their postcards at that time that they had sent to their families in Wales. And he's trying to identify the whole and establish the whole question of faith in today's times with our current governance, with our current communities, and how we as a people also think about faith in our lives. So I'm just setting the premise for all of you to understand the works that we are talking about. And my first prompt would be to Paribartana and Palani, because somewhere the people who you have focused on, we were discussing the other day that you said that they are twice removed from their realities, from their existence in a way, from their sense of belonging and identity. One is because it's a question of caste in both your works. And second is, in your case, Paribartana, because it's got to do with climate change, which is not in their control, right? So somewhere they not only get sort of discarded as a particular community because of their caste, but then there are additional factors like in Palani's work, the government is also not taking notice of this particular community and the number of deaths that happen as a result of manual scavenging. So I would like both of you to maybe share a little bit as to what happens to this community when nobody is really paying attention to them. So I'll hand over the mic to you, Palani. To Paribartana first? Okay, okay. Yeah, is that working?
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
yes.
Yes. Thank you everyone for coming here. Yeah, just to respond the question. So there's this community which is called Nolya, and Nolya is a Marine fishermen community, fisherfolk community at the coast of Bay of Bengal. And in my research and like studying since 1999 cyclone, these people are displaced because of land erosion and tsunamis and cyclones and all. But strangely, what happened that traveling on the coast and kind of documenting, I encountered a lot of empty villages, and half of which are broken due to sea level and all. Then in that search, I went to rehabilitation colonies, and also empty because colonies they're far from the sun, and because it was far, so the fishermen they couldn't go to the sun to fish. And I said, I don't know, there are a lot of people. So talking to Odisha, the states have different languages, and the state icon from that's only our language we speak. And this community is they speak Telugu language. So somewhere there is discrimination because of language conflict, and threshold to the border state like ocean thing. But they still and all the surveys there, and become the first victim. And complex, as I said, rehabilitation come far, so that's how they lose their job. And I don't know if I'm answering correctly.
Yes, thank you. I mean, also it was a question of, we were talking about also language, how language sometimes with these communities also becomes a way where the connection kind of gets disrupted between their existence of where they are, because they're not originally from that community. Right?
Yeah, that's what I came from a place living somewhere else now, so I do belong. That's a very complex question. So this community speaking the question facing this constant natural tragedies or crisis. So this belonging becomes a very complex question. So do they belong to Odisha? Do they belong to the coastal line? or British colony or surviving. And also it becomes interesting when we talk about migration that most of the fishermen I talk to them, most of them whom I had the interaction, now they speak 5 languages because they're traveling, they're meeting new people, so they speak Malayalam, they speak Tamil, Telugu. So that's migration brought a lot of other things like people migrating to so I constantly changing. So for me, when I was doing research, I observed that it's not a very solid, concrete idea of community. It always community is a very form. It always changes. It doesn't stay constant in one like a curve. And the technology, like now we have internet and phones and all. So over time, this technology also gives certain kind of access. That's why also communities are made. Like people who are living in groups, WhatsApp groups. That's how they communicate to each other, and that's how communities technology. And then if you are accessing certain kind of phone, like if you have Android phone, you will have a different community. If you have normal phone, you are having WhatsApp cameras and you have a different community. So that's so and so challenged, that's why the question of identity also becomes very complex. Where do you belong and what's your identity? Yeah.
And right, I think even you were narrating to me the other day that how there are even certain words in their language which do not exist in any dictionary per se. And maybe could you recite some of those words for us?
Yeah. So
and just explain them later,
yeah.
Perhaps what they might mean. But yeah.
So for me, when I started research, the question was there in my mind that where do like how does this kind of community constituted, like how it is made? So there was one idea I had that crisis makes us human and crisis makes us coming together. Otherwise, if there is no crisis, there is no community. That I had this thought in the beginning because if you go to the bus or train or restaurant, then you can sit alone. You don't look for where there are people and you don't say, no, that's the common behavior as we have. And with crisis, we try to that kind of broke down throughout the research. Then I found a paper with this word called empathy and solidarity. And it can be empathy and solidarity can be a better anchor than the crisis itself. So now I'm trying to push this idea. So when I was thinking about empathy and solidarity, I was looking at what community we can talk and what is the best community we have as human beings. And I'm talking about thinking dictionary. Dictionary is the best idea of community. There is assemblies of which is called you see Oxford Dictionary every year changing and all. So that is one of the provocation when I started collecting words. I'm collecting, trying to make another dictionary out of it. This doesn't exist in the dictionary. People speak conversation, and we were connected to climate change and time and seasons. So I'm really part of it. Khara means sunlight. Like mid pure Khara is that the light, sunlight. As all these words has very similar meaning because everything you can hear the khora is that you think, but it's expression. Like sometimes you feel it's I don't
Is it more of a feeling than a literal meaning? Is
Yeah.
that what it is?
Yeah. Yeah. So, Bikora khora, tu khora, huku khora, dukuch. Dukuch is another like adjective, like where you say like it's burning.
Burning.
Yeah, burning. Jhalse means there is this the same what heat, but your eyes are getting water inside it, and it's
It's burning.
yeah, but it has another meaning.
Right.
Blue is English word become part of vocabulary. Jhala is sweat. So science and fire is fire running. Sunstroke. Untimely. Values Tara is a very interesting term. This is also part of my research that because environmental disaster has become very ritualistically happening, it become part of the culture now. So Tara is a term which is invented now. Tara means time, time which also connotes to right of death. And Baisakh means summer. So summer, death in the summer, but it's the translation is wrong. Like means rain, but means rain, means rain clouds, so these are the words people speak just to elaborate that vastness of the nature, because Odisha is one of the poorest state and it has overwhelming nature everywhere. So you can't express this kind of experience through like I don't want to take so much of time.
That's thank you,
Yeah.
Parivartana. I think the reason why I brought in language in this whole discussion was because it's a form of identity, it's a form of connection, how we speak with each other, where we come from, where our connections get established, and which is why this whole effort that Parivartana is putting in finding out these almost verbal dictionaries, which are not available in the written form, was interesting to me as an aspect that we could look at in the form of establishing community connections. Thank you, Parivartana, for that recital. I'll hand over the mic to Palani to talk about somewhere about the whole sense of community within this one group of people that you have been somewhere intricately you've been part of their life. You've been day in, day out for so many years. I have seen you that you have been working with them. You have been talk about how their existence is almost non-existent in society.
You want to sit here? You can sit here.
Yeah, I will stand.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, welcome to this panel. So, like untouchable peoples. Untouchable people means they are facing problem every day in their life, the school, in the working place, and everywhere. But my work, I need to understand school life, my college life. I'm facing discrimination in my college life. I'm still not getting my scholarship, 72,000 in my college. But I don't know at the time. So what is what's happening in that particular time? After I take my camera and following, I'm working with so many social issues right now. I get some information for caste discrimination in India. So what is the role? It is a biggest role in the it's affected. They are living like lifeless life. The man is telling that it happening for so many years. Last 5 years, it's happened for 331 death in India. 331 death in India. You can think about, you can imagine lots of technology, we have so much of science development. But he doesn't have rather humanity passing because of problem in their life. Somebody going to second time, if at the time the gas leakage, they are also died at the time. They are not very well. Also, they have no option in their life. So many people come to if they are going to do other job, they ask me, if they are going to find another job, it's very hard to find another job also. So after that, people, after someone died in, I spoke about lots of kids there. Kids, the man is calling children also. I spent with lots of time. You can imagine last 7 years, this is my daily routine work. The man is coming up, it's my daily routine work. So I need to be on, but I can't. I don't want to do one more death in my life. But last week, when I in Chennai, it's every day happening, it's daily routine the life. But the government, every day they are moving. So I need to listen to them. They have a day. They have a we can imagine that. We can imagine. These will be good things, cute things. So they are living that they're going in 5 minutes or 10 minutes for the work. How does somebody call them Sunday? It's too horrible for them. It's too horrible for them. They are facing so many problems, various type of things. They have medical, non-medical insurance type of thing. You can think about any sanitation workers, living with your apartment, living with your, and you have to things. You can think about untouchable. It's no one. It's no one. How to, I will tell you something, the particular exiting, the school children, the management children going to study to school or college, they are discriminated for the teachers and professor also. In IIT also. In last week, one person died in IIT because the discrimination of the caste. No one care. So today, still, right now, read that one question. The IIT students in our hospital, we are sending our children, we are sending our sons we are calling for the end of life, in their life. We're asking some questions, The names can issues are very biggest issues. They are easily discovering children in their school also. They are put them work with the clean the toilet and people think they are going to study for this school for college. They are going to study only, but they treat like this kind of thing. But so many children drop out of school studies and college studies also. They went back that try to same work, try to find the same work. It's routine their life also. Generation, the government, the society, don't give a hope for them, their life. They put them for the Sepita or manhood. You can think about the manhood. We have so much of technology. We have so many engineers also. But India doesn't have any proper plan for management systems. It's called only management. Someone going to inside, it's a structure look like that only. So last year the government said, so many people said, Last 7 years, I'm facing lots of problems in my life. I have a problem with mental health. Sometimes I'm crying. Sometimes, I get in this place where the photographs because the photograph based on the people paying. I getting suffered. I getting some money. I getting the good life, but it's totally suffered. I'm getting guilty at the time. I need to move on. I need to go away from my work also. But I can't. We need to stand for people. We need to fight for them also. Maximum, uh, I will tell you an example. So that famous photographer. I was coming working last 20 years before. I'm still doing the workers are similar, the same, no change. So I'm totally suffer at the time. I'm waiting for going to ask some questions. Sir, how to change? When I start my photography journey, so many people said, this photography will change the world, the photography going to stop the world. So many kind of things, but it's not possible. So said to me, I told him about so welcome the people. It's lots of in the birthday also, in the lifetime also. Right now, lots of based issues, caste-based violence. Somebody is studying, good studying. Caste people also. Good study, good work also. So, in the life, I can imagine. So we also stand for the people, they are working for people life and working for the society. But think about they're working for the society, but no one care about that life also. And we need to stand for, we need to fight for the people. So I don't know what is the question. I don't know what I'm telling. So what is my work? So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Palani. Just to contextualize this a bit further, what Palani may be feeling a bit nervous talking to perhaps all of you, but I also know he speaks from his heart. He is somebody who really feels the pain of this community because he witnesses it almost every day. He has been making photographs of all these people who go into the manholes and they lose their lives because of the toxic gases, because they're not provided with enough amenities. And he is losing his sleep as a result of being a witness to these atrocities. The discrimination is happening every day. And his point that perhaps that he was trying to make is this, that I would like to stop doing this work every day because it also affects my mental health. But can I stop? If I stop, then who will continue to speak about this community? Because when we are on the road and we pass by somebody in a manhole, we don't even stop and bother to think that what is this person's life like? What happens when this person comes out of the manhole, out of the sewage, of the entire society and has to go back home to his wife, to his children. In fact, just this morning, Palani was narrating that earlier when he was documenting his work, he used to photograph them with their faces. And later on, some of the workers came and told him that don't show our faces. We want you to photograph what's happening to us, but just don't show our faces because our children might recognize and then they might feel extremely sort of sad and this might be traumatic for them because maybe they don't even disclose to their children that this is the work that they are into and they still have to make a living for their family and this is their life. So I really commend Palani for really putting himself out there, not just as a photographer, but actually as an activist. And this is where, when we say that photography should bring out change, what does it mean? It means participation. That's a really important aspect of many photographers' works. It's one thing to be a photojournalist, to go out there, do a story, get it published, win awards. Palani has received many grants for his work. He's received awards and grants, but he doesn't talk about them because for him, that is not what he's looking at when he's making this work. His work is for all of us present here to recognize that we need to perhaps stand up and put out maybe, information to our governments. We have Instagram now, which works quite powerfully. If we all unite and talk about these atrocities, there are times when governments are forced to look into these issues. But if there's only one person bearing the burden of it, it's also a lot on his shoulders. So thank you, Palani, for making this incredible work. And I hope you keep continuing to do it. And I hope that we are able to support you in whatever way we can. Maybe, I don't know, Sebastian, Tarun, do you want to contribute and say something on the whole idea of existence versus identity? You could unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to contribute. Please do just wave your hand if the connection is bad, because I think Tarun and I have really struggled to kind of hear much of the contributions, which has been a bit of a shame because
sorry about
the connection's not been great. But just wave at me if you can't hear me, and I'll just stop because it might be a bit.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you all for that. I think actually, yeah, Palani's work really kind of taps into something which is the importance of that, enacting change through photography. And I think in terms of identity, I mean, both Tarun's work and also Palani's work, you can see that activism is a true part of their identities in the work that they make, and really a move from that kind of, as you say, Suchi, the sort of detachment of photojournalists of the past, and actually, being very much these causes are kind of key parts of these artists' identity, and that really drives the work. So I think that's a really important point. I just wanted to kind of raise a little thing as a kind of provocation. I mean, just a point for just discussion, really. And I think one of the things that I see as a consistent throughout a lot of the works on display in the Communities of Choice showcase, I mean, Rishi's work, Dipanwita's work, is this idea about memory. Having worked on, memory in a kind of scholarly sense, as well as, in a practical sense, I mean, it's a bit of a misnomer, this idea of memory, because people think that when we talk about memories, we're talking about the past, but actually memory work in a praxis sense, in how we practice memory, is actually as much about the present and the future as it is about the past. And it's how we give meaning to that past in the present. So very much connected to these notions of identity. And I just wanted to quote a bit of the great scholar Stuart Hall, Jamaican British scholar, Marxist, who wrote a lot about these notions of identity and diaspora. And in his sort of seminal essay, which is Cultural Identity and Diaspora, he talks about identity in the following ways. And he says, quote, "Identity is not as transparent or unproblematic as we think. Perhaps instead of thinking of identity as an already accomplished fact, which the new cultural practices then represent, we should think instead of identity as a production, which is never complete, always in process and always constituted within, not outside representation. This view problematizes the very authority and authenticity to which the term cultural identity lays claim." And just another little, he kind of develops on this idea, and he sort of says further on in the essay that cultural identity is a matter of becoming as well as of being. It belongs to the future as much to the past. It is not something which already exists, transcending place, time, history, and culture. Cultural identities come from somewhere, have histories, but like everything which is historical, they undergo constant transformation. Far from being eternally fixed in some essentialized past, they are subject to the continuous play of history, culture, and power. Far from being grounded in a mere recovery of the past, which is waiting to be found, and which, when found, will secure our sense of ourselves into eternity, identities are the names we give to the different ways we are positioned by and position ourselves within the narratives of the past. So I really just wanted to kind of, I mean, Stuart Hall, those of you that are familiar, just as it was a real kind of powerhouse of thinking about these kind of terms in terms of identity, and very, he was the director of the Birmingham School of Cultural Studies and hugely influential in his thought. And I just really, maybe just as a point of kind of departure for discussion, just wanted to think about this idea about the relationship between the past, the present, and the future. And I think really much in the same way that memory work on identity is about how we give, you know, the past meaning in the present and the future. So in the context of Chile and some of the work that, you know, I think that this kind of statement that gets repeated in kind of human rights discourse in terms of human rights atrocities is this notion of never again. And that's a kind of constant reminder in the present that, you know, never again should there be these kind of acute kind of transgressions of human rights abuses in these kind of societal settings. And I mean, I think part of the work that I've sort of been working on for some time is how we kind of give meaning to that past for ourselves. So this, I might not be necessarily direct witness to the events of 1973, which was the coup that ousted the democratically elected socialist president Salvador Allende. But I am a kind of vicarious witness to that, and in this kind of Marianne Hirsch sense of post-memory, that those memories of trauma are passed down through generations, and I think that people, the next generations, can also give meaning to those kind of historic events. And I think that probably, I mean, I feel that resonates a lot with some of, the work that's on display, really. Dipanwi does work on partition and those kind of memories and how those are passed down through generations and also materialized in the present, really. So that's just a little summary.
Thank you. Thank you, Sebastian. Pavan, would you like to come in now, or can I prompt you with a question in a bit? Sorry, you need to mute.
Yeah. What Sebastian?
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes.
If I'm not very clear, then wave your hand. Two things I would like to respond to. You know, this one is this thing of a activist photographer. What in a certain sense, this hyphenation is. What is the activist photographer supposed to do? And that's something which one struggles with, that whether one is a photographer or photography becomes an extension of your partisan pleasures, or your activism starts learning from the very, the labor of photography. And that's something which we need to think about, because in that sense, especially, I'm a very late entrant to photography in that sense. And one of the things which I think excites me about photography is its ability to scrutinize history in a certainly different way than as a political person I scrutinize history. It's not necessarily only as a witness, also in a certainly analytical sense. And the work which if you all have seen, it's kind of ongoing work, and it's a examination of questions which normally historians or historians are present these days, political parties explore about what makes you an Indian, what is an authentic Indian, what is the role colonialism plays, is colonialism a disruptive influence, and all of this seen from a geographical location which is not Indian in that sense. It is part of India, it's part of the accident called India, what I call is the accidental cartography of India. And use photography and photography in a sense to deal with these questions. And I don't even belong to that community. I'm by accident started living. I grew up in Shillong, and I'm not a Christian. I'm married to someone who belongs to Khasi community, but beyond that, I don't even belong. So in that sense, the distance is something which I'm not embarrassed about, because I think that there is too much credence given to belonging. too much credence given to authenticity, too much credence given to, the truth value, authentic indigenous truth value. I want to, in that sense, photography helps me unpack my own partisan tendencies. So that is something which I wanted to talk about. I know that all these things are great, and as a political person who on everyday basis is a union activist and does those kind of things, one is always fascinated by the idea of commitment, about being take, but somewhere for me photography has helped me unpack my commitment in a certainly different way. That's something which I wanted to share.
Thank you.
About identity, Sebastian is right about becoming and being, and Stuart Hall. But again, to complicate that question is that there, especially now where identities are obviously people are trying to fix them, and then counter to that is the idea of a cosmopolitan identity, which is like fluid. But is it so simple, this binary between a cosmopolitan, open-minded, we are all great, we all love each other, we are globalized. But if you stay in a place like Shillong, and where a community, and as my partner Angela likes to point out, that if you remove her community, you can settle them in a small colony in Delhi. And their idea of identity, their questioning of cosmopolitan certainties in that sense. They are small community, Khasi community, one of the very few matrilineal communities left in India. For them, the anxieties about identity are different from my anxiety. I belong to a community which is like huge. I'm a Methil, I'm a Bihari, and I can fit in anywhere. So even this idea of identity being in a flux is something which frightens people who belong to such small communities. So, so the idea of diaspora, because diasporic notion of identity is about, it's more about flux, accept me, I should belong, I should do that. Or, I'm fluid in that sense. The fluidity itself is something we need to question.
Thank you, Tarun. Very valuable points that both you and Sebastian have made, and I will come back to your activism in just a bit. At this point, I wanted to borrow the notion of memory that Sebastian was mentioning earlier, and also the role and the connectedness of violence and memory, as you were mentioning, Sebastian, that trauma kind of keeps getting handed down through the generations. And even if you might not have been a direct witness to something that might have happened earlier, but there are generations going forward that continue to bear the burden. And I would like to Dipanvita Sharma, sorry, I keep doing this, Dipanvita Saha, who has been documenting the community of first question we removed from where they felt they belonged during the partition, also because they were probably migrants from Bangladesh, and then this whole question that arose during the CAA NRC protests, which was obviously more recent, but then these questions have been going on right from the time of partition. And the Pandita herself belongs to such a family. And I would like her to speak about violence and memory and how she's brought this together in her work.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to everyone to come here and listen of us. I think before I give you an answer, I want to say something about the community. The community, I believe, who has practiced the same culture and share the same language for me. And there is, and everyone in the community has role. Like some of them may be doctors, some of them may be engineers, some of them may be lawyer, or some of them may be, as Palani mentioned, as a manual scavengers. So everyone has their particular role about their work. And as I little bit know, in our culture of India, the caste system is brought up by our society. If you consider the babe, then there is no caste system as of there. There's just the segregation has been done just only because of their work, and such of their work they have been such of their works pattern they has been considered as they are Brahmins, they are who are actually doing the business. There has been some banik something Priya can relate these things. They actually do the business. So they are in Ved term we have a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. So the Vaishya is the one that who are dealing with the business, and the Kshatriya is the one who are dealing with like a fighter. Okay, and the Shudra is the one who are doing the works we are right now presenting as a Dalit. So they are doing, they may be cobbler, there may be some manual scavengers or anything who, and in our society actually thinks that they are just because they are doing some work which is not so much is well enough to call, but I believe they have a very, very important role for our society. Without them, our society cannot be belong, because we need our society clean. We need our cobbler for our shoes. We need our home servant, right? Sweeper also. So we need them. So for my understanding, community is something which is apart from this caste system and all that thing, and which is they are like sharing their language, same language, and sharing their culture as the same. I want to say something about this. When the India-Pakistan partition happened, the man who actually demarcated our country, he did not know about our culture. He doesn't have many understand about our language also. So he was stayed in India for maybe it's hardly for some days, and all of a sudden he just made the demarcation of this. And in Bengal, we the West Bengals and the Bangladesh, we share the same language, which is Bangla. But still, all of a sudden, overnight, the demarcation happened. And even there have been still, if you go in the village of the like border areas, you will find that we had a land on that portion, but overnight it's become a different country. And if we when we went on the morning for some our work, that mostly the agriculture field, so and all of a sudden we just heard that it is now become a Bangladesh, or it is now become a India, and we are now there, and our home is like on the other side. We are not able to go. If you want to go back our home, we have to travel a lot because of our demarcation. We have to cross the border, we have to cross our customs, we have to custom this. So this kind of thing. And when the Bengalis actually the East Pakistan's Bengali, I must say, came to in Kolkata, they has been recognized as a Bangal. So this is also a discrimination. And the native people of Kolkata is known as a Ghoti. The Bangal, how they become Bangal, because they were, and they till now they have been struggled with this term. Okay, that I am also a Bangal because my family came from that part. So our mother tongue may be Bangla, but we have some sort of a language variations, like if I say ask you in Bangla, "Kemon acho," which means that how are you? In Bangal, the term we will say "Kemon achen maiya." Okay, so this kind of thing is there. And when they come to Kolkata, they have to struggle a lot due to their language. Due to their language, they have to struggle a lot. They have been identified that you are Bangal. until those peoples are living like Tripura and in Assam also, they can also, I hope, relate, because they have same kind of language they are still using. But in Kolkata, it is nowadays, it is like fading out. And I can say that in my family also, my sisters, my brothers, they don't even know how to speak the Bengal language. So I was a little bit interested, because in my family, my mother and my father used to speak in Bengal when they are in their home. So, and
I just wanted to come. Sorry, I just wanted to come back to the question of violence and memory. Something that we were talking about earlier today, that all the people that you have interviewed, there are oral histories that you have recorded over time for this particular project. As part of all those recordings, the whole connection between violence and memory as part of one single community, could you maybe talk a little about that? And maybe one of the women who you had recorded, maybe we could play her recording after you are done.
Yeah, actually the project I have built, that name of the project is Trail of Blood. I think most of you visited. If you not, I would request it, please go and explore our work, not mine. There were other artists too, they have did brilliant work. Please do and visit. Come to my project. So my work is based on, I already mentioned, it is India-Pakistan partition. As I mentioned earlier, that I've come from a partition-oriented family. They are mostly migrated from the East Pakistan. And I have grown up with the stories like friendship, also the biology, like the mess up happened with them, the rat story and all that stuff. So somehow I have been, but I unknowingly, the sense, marginal hatred, which is also coming to my mind. And I didn't even notice, because I have all the friends when I was in school, all are kind of a Hindus. There is no such of a Muslim. So I don't have this, I don't even recognize that. But when I went to my college, then one of my friend, the roommate was Muslim. So her name is Nasmeen Begum. And I just didn't know her, who is she and how she is. I just asked to my hostel superintendent that I don't want to live with this lady. Can you please change my room? So she asked me, what's the problem? Do you know her before? I don't know. Then what's your problem? So I don't know, I don't want to leave. Just I can't still say, told him that no, I don't want to live with a Muslim. So I was hard. Muslims are bad, and Muslims. Want to stay with them. But in college, we are not allowed ready to listen all this shit. So I have to stay with her. So fortunately, then we become very good friends. Till now, we are very good friends and we have become a best friend. So that thing actually instigate me, that I did not see the partition thing. I did not face the violence, what my parents actually faced. But how this idea come to me, then I understand that this is something, the words actually we have listened from our childhood, we have grown up, that the words, actually the provocative words actually provokes you. As I did not know the history of the partition, as I don't know anything, then I'm just out of the blue, I'm just coming and I'm just listening all my parents, and I'm just come to a conclusion that she's not a good person and I'm not stay with her. So that things actually instigate my projects. So when I start researching research this work, actually it's to gain my knowledge that what is the partition, how it's happened and how it's done. So then I learned little bit from the book, from the testimonies, and then I met with the people who actually witnessed this his era. And then I come to understand that the partition actually happened in some of the phases. There are many phases, but in 19, particularly I mentioned in 1946, 16th August, one riot happened in the streets of Calcutta, which is named at the Great Calcutta Killing. And the riot lasts for 4 to 5 days. But official records, it's concluded that in this 4 to 5 days, there's a 5,000 or 10,000 people has been died. But unofficially, it is uncountable because many dead bodies has been found from the manhole, from the water tanks, so many other places. And then the riots has been the retaliation has been directly, immediately triggered into the east side of the Bengal, which is right now in Bangladesh. It's Noakhali, and after that the retaliation go onto the Bihar, Bhagalpur, and then it's go to the Punjab, next to the Punjab. So then before the partition, Gandhiji was not with this kind of ideology that we are going to be partition the nation. We are supposed to be fight for the one nation. We are not be parted. But when the continuous retaliations happen, then the partition decision has been taken by the Gandhiji that he agreed that we have to part the country. Otherwise, we can't stop this retaliation. The killing will be go on and go on. So that's how the actually India partition happened. And I find that in India specifically, I don't know about the other countries, about the Bangladesh or the Pakistan's history, as I belong from the India. So in India, we mostly heard about the stories that the Hindus has been come from that part, is maybe from the East Pakistan part or maybe from the West Pakistan part, but there have lot of people. If you check our census data on that period, there have a lot of Muslim peoples and the Hindu peoples was there as coexisted on that time period. But after the shift happened, where is those Muslim people population has gone, that is, there is no particular record we found. Something has happened, right? So they also actually, Muslims also migrated from the India side too. So I'm trying to document on my project that the Muslims narratives and the Hindu narratives both, they have shared the same, whatever their community, whatever their religious factor, whatever they have belonged from, but the pain is still there. And when I talk to them, they always mention, all the elders mention that when we was there before the partition, then we lived, so we actually coexisted. Our Hindu and the Muslim, we live around the same area. But nowadays, after the 75 years of the partition, now we can find that in particularly Kolkata, the particular portion has been segregated, and it has been, I would say that it would be being a pocket, that some of the portion we rather call it as a Muslim dominated area and others are Hindu dominated area. And people till now, they are not willing to rent a house, the Muslim person in the Hindu community, and also for the Muslim, they are not willing to rent their house to the Hindu. So this mentality is still there. In our generations, we never go through all these things directly, but it is the oral history, oral story that's going forward from generation to generation, and which is very important. It is like every story has been changed slightly. So if original story is A, it is going to someone's like a B. Okay, they have added, there are some narratives or there are some expressions. So that is also there. And yes, I
Sorry about that. Dipandit, I was just wanting to bring in one of the testimonies
yes,
of,
definitely.
one of the people that you had interviewed. Yogesh, if we could play that testimony for us.
নামটা কি?
কার আমার
হ্যাঁ,
নীরদা দেবনাথ
আচ্ছা। আপনাদের নোয়াখালীতে কোথায় বাড়ি ছিল?
Testimony. Yeah, just for everybody to know.
কোন গ্রামে?
আমরা নোয়াখালী মঞ্জা ছিল মঞ্জা ফেনীর পূর্বে
আচ্ছা,
ফেনীর পূর্বে মঞ্জা উত্তর মঞ্জা
উত্তর মুন্ডা।
হ্যাঁ
আচ্ছা,
আচ্ছা
তো কি আপনার কি মনে আছে যদি একটু বলেন আমাকে, আমি আসলে বই লিখছি তাহলে আমার একটু সুবিধা হতো।
আচ্ছা এই রাত 7 দিকে সন্ধ্যে হলে সুস্থ করে থাকতে পারতাম না, কি চারদিকে হই হই উঠে যায়, কি উঠে যায়, মুসলমান আসতে আছে হিন্দু কাটতে, এই মুসলমান আসতে আছে হিন্দু কাটতে, পালা পালা এইসব বলে, ভয়ে 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 তব কতদিন ছিলাম। আর রঞ্জিতের বাবার আবার ওরে ক্ষতি করছিল, কে হাত পা ফুলে গেছিল ওই অসুখ, কি করবো ওই লোকটারে বলছি যে চলো চলে যাই হিন্দুস্তানে, কয়ে এই জায়গা বাসা সব আমরা বড় বাড়ি আমার শ্বশুরের দিই না সম্পত্তি, এই আরে কিচ্ছু কেউ কিনবেও না, পয়সাও পাবো না, যাইতে হবে ফেলে তুই। তবে এরকম বলতে বলতে কতদিন দেখলাম, দেখে দে না ও আসবে না, এই ছেলে মেয়ে 7 জন নিয়ে।
Yes, yes, yes. The voice you hear, the lady named is Niroda Devnath. She also mentioned, and she was aged near about right now is 90 plus, I think 92. When I asked her that if you could tell about your story, she actually came from the Noakhali, which I mentioned that after the Calcutta killing, the immediate retaliation happened in the Noakhali on the Bangladesh side. So she came from that side. She told that she was a big house. It's like near about they has a palace on that era, on that space. But when the riots actually happened, they have to left all those things and they have to move to India. And when she was traveling with her 4 children, I think, with along with his husband, but his husband is not willing to come into India. But she was trying to convince him that please come, otherwise we want to be lived there, because the scenario is getting day by day dangerous. And when she was coming, she was traveling she followed the route actually from the Agartala Tripura sites, and then she came to in the Ranaghat area, where is a camp also made, which we known as a Cooper's camp. So she lived on that camp, and when she was traveling, she lost her husband. So when she come to in this camp to grown up her children, she have to do as a house servant in the in the rail colonies. Actually, Ranaghat Coopers is famous for the railway areas. So in the rail quarter, she was serving as a house servant, and then she actually made her thing. And after these 75 years almost, she was telling that till now, when I close my eyes, I can still those incidents still it's come to my dream, and it's very horrifying for me, and I'm getting very 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 much traumatic for this. So those are the narration of this.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dipandita. And on that note, I mean, there were a lot more things that we had hoped to discuss, but in the interest of time, and also because we want to have a conversation with our other artists as well, we've been distributing a lot of these postcards to all of you who are here. And we want to know what is your notion of community. Some of you might have gone and see the show. If you haven't, even then, after this discussion, and perhaps from your own histories, maybe if you could just write a short note as to what is your feeling and notion on community. And I'll very quickly read out one postcard that is by a Sri Lankan artist who's present here. In fact, that's another project that we are showcasing, a documentary film tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. over here. His name is Riyal Rafai, and he's just used words and terms that define community for him. And he says, community is about zero corruption. It's about justice, freedom, creativity, respect, forgiveness, education, understanding, helpfulness, equal opportunity, peace. Now, these are all the keywords that I would like for you to take back. And I hope that in spite of all the technical glitches and some language issues, I hope that you all still are taking away a thoughtful narrative on belonging versus identity. And I will leave you all with one beautiful quote that I read recently: to do more than belong, participate, do more than care, help, do more than believe, practice. This is by William Arthur Ward. And I'll leave you on that note. Thank you to our artists who've been doing this phenomenal work. I will now invite my colleague Mitul Kajaria, who's also been part of the think tank of this project. He's the one who's written the concept note for this project that is there at our exhibition. And Mitul will be in conversation with our artists, Rishi Kocher, Kashish Kocher, Tessa Hawley. I hope Susan might be joining online, Hugh Alden Davis, and of course, Gareth Owen. So over to you, Mitul.
Yes, sure. And
of course, the gifts are on their way.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you for being there. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry, can I have you come forward? Unfortunately, the other mics are not reacting. Yeah.
If I haven't heard it wrong, Deepanvida said that about caste system, that each in this society, caste is professionally serving a role. I mean, the roles that based on caste, that is there, and it sends for me like it is something necessary, and it sends to me like how we look at gender. I mean, how gender is being placed and very rigid in this society, that like women should do certain roles, that women are housemakers, and why don't women be collector, or why don't women be minister, or why don't women be full-time artists, documentary filmmakers, photographers, like that. It's not fixed roles. It's what we benefit from. Each person in India benefits from caste. That's what I want to tell here, and that's it.
Hello, am I audible? So before we begin the second panel, I just wanted to check in with everyone because this is a very heavy conversation that we sat through. And we all want to take a moment, stretch your legs, feel free to, and we can begin in a minute. The second request is, I can't force you, but I'd request everyone who is towards the end to please come forward. And I'll share why is this request to all of you. If you don't mind, you just step forward. There's a lot of empty chairs in the front. Everyone feel settled in? So the reason I requested everyone to come in the front is for those who have come just afresh and for those who were there in the earlier panel, an extension of unpanel the panel. What this panel discussion was imagined to be was not a question being asked by the moderator to the artist, but we imagined this to be a conversation between all present here. We are looking at this as a community that we formed, that we are occupying a same space for an hour. And this will be that. I have questions to the audience as well. You're not forced to answer, but I hope someone might want to respond. And please feel free at any point in the conversation if you have anything to talk about, anything to share, or a question for anyone else, or for the open audience as well. Please feel free to participate. Does that sound okay? The title for this second panel is Coexistence, Navigating Multiplicity in Communities. And I'll just elaborate a little before getting into conversations. Another quick poll. How many of you have been able to visit the show, Communities of Choice? This is just to set context as to how much do we need to share about the work and how much not. Yeah, thank you. So the note that describes the exhibition begins with, who am I, where do I belong? Do I belong to a community? Do I belong to many? And what we will be looking at in this conversation is the term, do I belong to many? We are a part of a web of interwoven communities. Some we have the privilege to choose, while others are simply assigned to us. The reason I say this, because when I wrote this note, I figured there's a number of labels in communities that I'm assumed to be a part of and that I cannot shed. And I'm not even going into the difficult unshedding of labels of caste or religion. I'm fairly privileged on that front that I'm a male, I'm a Hindu, but there's still a number of communities that we are often just assumed to be a part of, and some that everyone has the privilege to choose, some only a few do. But I think what best describes this this panel is a postcard that one of you wrote earlier this morning. It reads, being a human being, we are members of many communities within a society. We function at many levels and we are part of sub-communities that we have built to survive. A community to me is a place where I feel supported, cared for, and loved. And to me, this is an ideal definition of what a community is or should be or we should aim for. This was written by someone called Tanupriya Sharma. So thanks, Tanu, if at all you're listening to this. And I will not be describing what the works are because I see a fair fair number of you have seen this show, and I'm hoping in the conversation you'll get a better context of what the works are about. The first prompt I have is for you, Gareth. I understand that you began your project, it's called Make Me Up, with curiosity to see what comes out of this exercise of commissioning freelancers on an online platform. You shared a self-portrait, and your brief was to make you look cool, beautiful, and then that's where the project began. Could you share a little about what has happened since, and what is the show now, and how do you feel about that process?
Hoping we're going to get massive feedback here. Can everybody hear okay? Yeah. Got to switch it on, have you? All right, okay.
How about now? Fantastic. Okay. Well, I'll try and keep it brief, and I'll also answer through the medium of song. Only the first bit is true. Yes, the project is called Make Me Up. The community is the kind of a self-selected community of digital professionals who are signed up to the Fiverr marketplace. Fiverr is a bit like Amazon, but instead of selling goods, these people sell their kind of digital expertise. You can get branding done, a website built, voiceovers for a video, or Photoshop. And as you said, I took a really technically deficient portrait, and that's not it. And I sent it to these practitioners on Fiverr with the same instruction to make me handsome, young, and cool. A good number of them refused. Some says this is too difficult. Others said you'd have to pay me a hell of a lot more if you're going to get me to do this work. But some, around 50 in total, responded from across the globe, from Finland to the US to Canada to UK, and a good proportion from the Indian subcontinent, around 20 over the 50. I'd kind of expected that, you know, you might get some kind of quirky responses, and yeah, that's one. But also imagined that the cultural differences in how kind of handsomeness or coolness was perceived would kind of come through from the images as well, and to a certain extent it did in certain regions. In the Arab states, the response came back, and I was almost always in a suit or in a shirt and tie with a thick black moustache. The kind of variations across the world were kind of less clear after that point, really, and I'm not sure why that is. Is that just because of the kind of the power of kind of Hollywood culture, fashion magazines, and that conception that people have is becoming more homogeneous? I'm not sure. In terms of that community, it was a kind of a one-time community. I've not really kept in touch with those people who did the gigs for me. A good few months after finishing the project, I did try to get in touch with some of these people to just trying to tease out, you know, why did you make these particular choices? You know, I'd not had enough hurt from looking at the kind of the changes that are already made. But not many of them really kind of happy to engage. They, you know, they've got the money, they've done the gig, and they kind of moved on. Did that answer your question, or did I just go off on a total tangent?
I think we can ask the audience
to
answer. Just a thumbs up would be.
Yeah, or if you've got any questions that kind of stem from that, because I promised to be brief, and I'll keep to my promise. But if you've got any questions, I'm happy to ask them. Or answer them later.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary. I think another thing that I found interesting about your project, which was more intriguing than interesting, was the observation about online virtual communities, which is something which is very recent, which is something that we don't associate very easily with the notion of community when we hear the word community, we rarely think about a virtual community. How was that? How did an observation come up? Any thoughts on how do you see that progressing, moving on from here?
Mine was a transactional community. You know, so there were none of those words that you mentioned earlier about kind of love and respect were there. It was a transaction. I asked, they gave, and that was the relationship, which is very different to Tessa and Susan's kind of community and the work that stemmed from that. But I'll let you talk about that in a minute.
Thank you. Since you mentioned Tessa and Susan, are we audible to you?
Hi, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, that's good.
Lovely.
Hi.
So I think I would like to move on to your project. This project, I understand, began during the pandemic.
Yeah, coming out of.
Yeah, so I wanted to know what prompted this idea. Project begin. What was the initial nudge that required you to think about this?
Yeah.
And feel free to answer whoever.
So firstly, hi, Susan. Nice to.
Hi, Tessa. It's good to see you. Let me know when you want me to speak. I'll try not to butt in.
Well, it's kind of, this is actually how it started. Me and Susan met online. We did the entire project virtually. We didn't.
Yes, we met, didn't we? We met in person for the first time after the project was finished.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we didn't meet in person until after we completed it. But yeah, so we kind of wanted to explore communication and different types of communication and how it varies, how differently the same phrase or words can be interpreted by different people. So we called upon our own communities, starting with our sort of friends and family and the people closest to us, and then sort of gradually branching out to just sort of strangers on social media. And we asked sort of different tasks from those different groups of people to sort of demonstrate the idea that those closest to us would do more for us, essentially. Yeah, I don't know if you want to expand on that, Susan.
Yeah, I found it quite interesting, actually, because we had made an assumption that the people closest to us would be willing to do more, but actually there were complete strangers who, or near strangers who did an incredible amount of work for us and really lovely quality work and really contributed to the project. So by the end of it, I was really pleasantly surprised by that.
Yeah.
And your project is called the Red Cave, and that comes from the largest name of a place in Europe, if I understand this correctly.
That's right, yeah.
And this was one of the keywords that you shared with different communities and asked them to respond in their own way.
Yeah.
Is there a way I can ask you to pronounce that name, or is that too difficult?
I can give it a go. So it's Banvai Puthquingith Gogera Controbo Shanticilio Gogogo.
Oh, well done.
Oh my goodness. Does anybody else want to have a go?
And what does it translate to? Do you?
So the English translation of that is Saint Mary's Church near the Hollow of the White Hazel. And
Tessa, sorry to interrupt. Do you want me to do this?
I was going to say, I always forget English.
I've got it written in front of me. It's St. Mary's Church in the hollow of the Red Cave, near to the rapid whirlpool of Llantysilio of the Red Cave.
Yeah.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
More or less, it's close and it's quite a direct translation, but it's sort of it's not sort of each individual word. It is a little bit paraphrased, but yeah, it's quite a direct translation as far as I know. Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned a theory by an anthropologist called Robin Dunbar in your note. I'd like you to briefly share what the theory is, but an extension of that point is what I found interesting is I see the theory being practiced in your work, both while you're collaborating with the different communities, as well as in the final installation video that's on display. Could you share a little bit on that?
Yeah, so Robin Dunbar's theory was that people can, everybody has a finite number of people that they can have a relationship with, and he sort of demonstrates that in a diagram of concentric circles, with your friends and closest, your family and closest friends being sort of the center circle, and it gradually getting, you know, more loose relationships the further out the circle is. So yeah, that was kind of how we started with choosing who to ask, what we wanted people to do, basically. Any thoughts, Susan, on that?
No, I thought you explained it really well. And I think we started off really by just wanting to create a project that pitched ourselves almost at the center of the circle, just the two of us. And so we worked on a number of kind of collaborative tasks just individually between us. And then based on the kind of concentric circles, we worked outwards, pitching different tasks, as Tessa said. Yeah, and I think we also worked outwards geographically as well, and began not just looking at the people closest to us, but looking at local communities geographically and moving outwards across the world to begin to pull in people. I think that feeling of coming out of COVID as well, where we were working remotely, we wanted to create a real world experience for people as well, to ask them to actually create something that was interacting with us, because we were all stuck at home, weren't we? So much. So I think it worked in terms of kind of communities and relationships, but also geographically to just pull people towards us and pull people together.
Yeah, and on that sort of geographical note, we had hoped originally, and potentially still will, to expand it further, because we kind of ended up with time constraints and who we knew and everything. We kind of stopped doing Europe essentially, but you know, expanding that further would you know, is something we would like to do at some point. We've discussed and now we know lots of people here, maybe that would make it a lot easier. So yeah.
Thank you. Susan, to pull something from what you said, you mentioned you began this project as imagining a collaboration between you and Tessa, but we discussed at some point, I don't remember when, but we discussed about how this project now have multiple collaborators and all of their works you gracefully included into the work that you put out. So we discussed something along the lines of shared authorship when it comes to an artist presenting the work. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it, shared authorship? Because really, although Tessa and I, in a way, it got to a point where it felt a little bit like curating as much as creating. That really, although we obviously we made the video and we made the sound piece ourselves, it was using material that we'd made, but also material that just came, really lovely contributions that came from people, using people's voices, there was a piece of music that's included in it that was composed and recorded by someone else, people's stories. So we were very keen to make sure that we honored and respected all of the contributions. So everybody who contributed was included, nothing was excluded from the final piece. But it does, like you say, raise that issue of who owns the piece in the end. And certainly when we submitted it to this, we had to kind of talk to a lot of people and say, okay, this piece is here now, and are you okay with this? And but people were really supportive. So I think in the ways that we've presented it, we've tried to include people's names and include, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. It's a tricky one.
It does. Thank you. Thank you, Tessa.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to move to Kashish. You okay? Your project is titled Space as a Catalyst. And what I understand you've done is you've observed and documented a single quintessential public square in the old city of Ahmedabad called Manik Chowk. And we discussed a little before while we were discussing the project that in this particular case, but also not necessarily in this case, a space shapes the community and the community occupying the space shapes the space itself. So it's almost an exchange. A word on this in the project that you did?
Yeah. I have a example which I don't know if I've mentioned before to expand on what you said.
Sure.
So geographically and physically, Manik Chowk exists in an axis with the Kings and Queens Mausoleum. To give context, Manik Chowk is the oldest, one of the oldest and unique example of a traditional public square, which does not hold a community by choice, but it holds a community by choice of the space, and that in turn shapes the people and their practices. So there's a 24-hour cycle to the space, which does not have a start or a stop button. But to understand it in the more simpler way, like I've mentioned this before, how we start our days in the morning, I can start how the space shapes in the morning. We have cattle who come and feed on the waste or the stuff which is disposed out of the vegetable market, which is set up before. And there is an exchange of, so the disposed vegetables are fed to these cattle and cows who come from a space which no one knows of. And this transaction is initiated by a person who, again, I don't know who that person is. He charges people he sells the disposed stuff to, and they feed it as a religious activity to the cows. So there's a transaction in terms of economy and in terms of shared space over time. That's one example. And then as we move forward during the day, there is the cleaning of the square which takes place, and also of the formal shops which are set up around the square. And there comes in trucks which carry canisters of water because there's no water supply in this area. And there's another transaction which is happening through a transportation system from a different area into this area. And again, these canisters go back and come back in the morning next day, and even in the midnight. That's another example. And then when these shops are set up, there are peak hours around 12 and 1 where there is maximum footfall for the formal shops. And we have few carts of snacks, chaat and stuff. And as we transition into the evening, we observe the closing of the formal shops, and a setting up of a stage for the Manik Chowk food market to take place, which attracts the most amount of footfall. And the carts which are used in this area in the evening are actually parked at around the Kings and the Queens Mausoleum. So they are basically dead during the day, but they come to life during the evening and to much more life during the night. This was the example which I had, and I don't know how it skipped my mind to mention before to anyone, but yeah. And yeah, and that's how the day sets during the night. And there is another form of cleaning process which is done by the AMC workers, that's Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation. And there's another start to the day, which is, I don't know if it's a start or an end, but yeah, we're back in the cycle.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if I were to imagine that 24-hour period in that space, and to very quickly from the top of the head count the communities if we can, there is a community of vegetable vendors and locals living around that area to come buy the vegetables in the morning. Then there is the community of, I think, the jewelry stores in that area. So those formal shop owners and their customers. And moving on from there, there's the food market you mentioned, and which is something I have heard about before I ever visited the place through a lot of travel guides and magazines. So I understand there's very different people, including tourists, including locals, people from various cities I've heard come down to eat at this market. And then we circle back to the morning. And this is all happening in the same space.
Yes, and if time allows, I could also expand on how gender and identity come into play while the spaces are being shaped, and thus it's shaping the community with an example of how the kings and the queens mausoleum are in contrast in terms of the practices with what happens in Manik Chowk. Like one example is the dead and alive carts. That's a contrast during the day and night. And then the King's Mausoleum is basically does not allow women to enter, and the Queen's Mausoleum welcomes everyone, but the person who guards it is a male, and the women are not allowed to get photographed in front of the dargahs inside the mausoleum. So there are different practices which are dominated by religious practices, but the population who lives around the Queen's Mausoleum is dominated by women. So there's a constant fade in, fade out of who occupies what because of their identity. But I'm not sure if that's the only thing to blame it on. So
of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on to you. I think first of all, I'd like you to briefly catch up the audience on what the project is, because there's multiple layers, and I've seen the installation multiple times, but still there's just multiple layers to what you've done. And then I think we can move on to the question. That's okay.
Yeah, of course. I should mention the project is called Separation of Symmetry. It's part of a much bigger project called Zennial, and it looks at a microgeneration between Generation X and millennials in the 80s. It incorporates a lot of ideas and things like nostalgia, cultural identity, and technological determinism, and is based on some theories by Marshall McLuhan, who talks about how media and technology is changing and shaping our cognitive behavior. So as a result of the technology, we are thinking and behaving far differently as time goes on. This was a theory he had during that time as well. So I'm looking at how people looked at things during that moment when the Zennial was born, during the cusp of the digital generation, or digital revolution, I should say. So does that sum it up?
I think so. Yeah. So while reading your note, and while one of the times when I was going through your film, this line just caught my eye, which is you write how the film is a retro futuristic gaze on the uncharted generation that bridges the gap between two eras, described as Generation X and Millennials. And when I was watching the film with this line still in my subconscious, I could sense the yearning, the longing in certain voices that speak. A longing for the community that was, a longing for a feeling of home they found in the nature and the natural elements of the valley. And at the same time, there were certain voices that give away a sense of unrestrained excitement, of the impatience to be a part of this era of technological digital revolution. Now, if I understand correctly, this is two set of voices coexisting in the same time period. And if that is the case, I'm sure there is bound to be a certain overlap between these voices wishing for different futures in the same space. And in some cases, maybe there's conflicts between these two sets of voices. What was your experience like when you were working on this?
When I started this project, it was based on my own feelings about this time. And then I thought, this is bigger than me. I had to invite other people, but people who were part of that micro generation. So I invited those in the community to begin with, around my age or born between 77 and 84, extending slightly either side, and asking them to tell me how they felt about that time. How was that shaped them? Talking about technology, how that affected our culture, how it's affected our identity within that culture, and this idea of Welsh, being Welsh, and how that's informed by all these things. When I was a kid, I looked at technology and I grabbed it with both hands because I recognized the access it was giving me to everything, whether that's knowledge, later education, all these kind of things. And everybody felt the same way. When I was talking to them, you could feel it's like, yeah, I remember that. I remember this, but they also came back to them. There was a negative side, how they recognized the things that have disappeared. Like I remember one or two telling me, that the kids don't do this anymore. They don't play in the park. They don't climb trees. And there was one of the guys in one of the interviews. They said they don't build dens anymore. They don't know how to interact with nature and be part of that whole thing and playing in the streets. And it just got bigger and bigger in the way that people resonated with that time, and there was a deep sense of loss. So yeah, it's grown from that. And I think the biggest thing that I'm learning with this project is the nostalgia, and what I'm learning from it is the positive impact that nostalgia has and how that can change a community by getting people involved. By using this nostalgia, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that. So they're getting involved more than they would if it was, I don't know.
No, I think you're on a great track. Please continue.
Yeah. So from what I'm learning, people are getting more involved. They're getting more excited about that. So the sense of well-being is a big impact on that. They feel, from what I've learned, is that it creates a more increased sense of belonging as well, especially within the project. And according to some philosophers on nostalgia, this is exactly the effect we kind of produce through that. There's also, so I'm told, the idea that it increases individual identity. Now, that might be contradictory to some of the things that I'm trying to create here in terms of working together, but it does seem that there's a shared. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah. So nostalgia has helped me develop a community project and helped me to get people to participate more in the project. And it's been, I think, a success so far. It's a big project, and I tend to take this on for another couple of years. It's not something I want to finish for a long time. I want to get a broad range of the generation that I'm recording and trying to get as much voices into that as possible. And so far, it's going good.
Thank you. And I think very casually when we were discussing this, we came to an realization that this is not necessarily restricted to that particular generation. We hear this conversation of children not doing particular things changing with each generation we interact with. And another, I think, parallel we drew yesterday was in the video in the beginning, there is a person speaking about the dangers of technology. And the dangers of technology at that point of time, the person is referring to is a personal computer. When I was going through the video and I was going through news yesterday, I see this exact same conversation about AI and how people are really afraid of AI is going to really take over our world. So in a way, it's cyclical. It's 40 years later, but we're still having the same conversation, and that nostalgia and fear seem to remain constant during these periods. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I kind of go back again. Now, when I was a kid and I recognized the computer, for instance, later on, that became a massive advancement for me because I'm dyslexic, okay? So reading and writing was not a thing for me, but the computer gave me access to knowledge and particular ways that I could organize myself, and made it possible to change all the things that have become, or that were obstacles for me as a child. This technology changed everything, and I see that that's possibly the thing for the new generation. It's going to open doors. It's also going to close doors. And yeah, I think there's always going to be fears of what it's doing, but
Absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you. At this point, I think we're going to pause for a second and check in with the audience. If you have any thoughts, any notes, any comments or questions for anyone. Just raise your hands and the mic will reach. Will the mic reach there?
In relation to where we are now, in relation to another regional language, did any of that come up?
I think so. Well, for me personally, yeah, there has been a lot of connection to these things like language and stuff. I think that's a difficult one to answer. Yeah, it's a big one to unpack. Yeah, I think I'm not sure I'm the right one to answer. I've got too many things coming to the front of my head. In terms of culture and language, I'm talking about it from a point of view where a generation has to deal with the past, kind of like Sebastian was talking about it earlier, in terms of the past, future, present, and it all unfolds back and forth on each other. But I was a generation that was told, you're from a mining community. I'm still from a mining community. I'm not from a mining community. I'm from a community that's born out of all these other things, but yet it's being forced on me. So the past is still affecting who I am as a Welsh person in the Welsh valleys, and yet that's nothing to do with who I am and what's informed me. However, at the same time, that past has informed me. So the closing of the mine and the loss of jobs and all these kind of things, it's impacted who I am, and that's been passed on. But I'm also embracing the future and how we can use that to inform our identity as well. And I recognize that in a lot of the stories being told. My position, however, is slightly more privileged, and that's something I recognize. My story in that sense is a little bit more removed in relation.
Yeah, in terms of Welsh language with mine and Susan's project, we obviously use the longest place name in Europe, which happens to be in Wales. And part of why we chose that, as well as us being from Wales, is because we wanted, it's kind of a bit of a fun thing to, to learn how to say it. And we kind of wanted to bring that to other people and to other communities and to other cultures, and see how well other people could say it if they, had never tried before. So that was part of our piece, was audio recordings of people attempting to say it for the first time. And yeah, so that was part of it, was quite a big part of it, was trying to push the Welsh language a little bit further, I suppose. And I think even using the English translation to do that kind of, it still makes it about the Welsh language because that's where it started. So yeah, I don't know. Have any thoughts?
I think, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this, but the way I see a connection between languages or the two cultures that we're currently based in is the essence that I understand of the projects is, where in Tessa and Susan's project, the essence I see is how different communities respond to the same term very differently. And that I think is something that's true to, well, all communities, or regardless of where we are or what culture we're part of. Similarly with Hugh's project, I think the sense of nostalgia or the sense of fear of the future or technology, I don't think is restricted to a particular community. It's quite prevalent throughout wherever humans have existed, if that makes sense.
Nostalgia is the driving force behind certain objects. That is, I think it's the assumption that the past was better, and that is quite problematic in this sense. But if we talk to that about
Maybe get.
Hi, yeah, interesting questions. I'm put my cards on the table. I'm a native Welsh speaker, but my project has got nothing to do with language. Just kind of put it, thinking about your point around nostalgia, and also with points that Sebastian made in the earlier panel discussion around memory. From my perspective on how politics and education is developing in Wales, the education system is kind of memorializing kind of culture and history and incidents, and kind of driving or trying to forge a national identity that in turn is kind of driving a kind of for greater political independence, but a kind of a line that kind of runs through that kind of political independence movement is based on nationalism. And with that nationalism comes a certain friction, an antagonism, a feeling of that lot, the English over the border, for example. So yeah, I absolutely kind of recognize that there's a tension there that you've got to be incredibly careful about it.
I think a fleeting thought that I dare to speak about here when you talked about nostalgia and the ill effects that we've seen of people using it as a tool is it's actually an expansion of the pronoun. It's a double-edged sword, right? But breaking out of the binary, nothing is double-edged. There's just a multiple edges to how this notion of nostalgia is utilized, and it only really depends on which community's lens are we looking at nostalgia from. And
I'd like to add a little bit to this, because it's something that I'm using as a tool for positivity, to draw people together and make something, because a lot of the work that started in terms of collaboration for me was the idea of neoliberalism and the idea of, this consumerism, people being drawn away from each other and isolating themselves. And I'm using it as a tool to pull people together. So I'm trying to see the positivity in that rather than negativity. However, when it arises, and it does sometimes, especially through those ideas of nationalism, what I've found myself is when people come together, they don't tend to share those negative ideas. They tend to draw on all the positives from a natural place. So I do think it's definitely a positive tool.
Thank you.
Hi, so it's actually not also something studying. So, in the character of Colin he talks about like once you And that it might like it will affect the culture, like we are thinking thought like what's culture, what's community, and nostalgia and fear. And this again, this dialogue comes in my mind from a thing that I've seen recently, where this person talks about the enemy of culture is not dissent, it's nostalgia. And whenever people like tries to understand that this thing that we have to reach towards the end, towards the solution, but to reach towards the end, towards the solution, but again, reaching before arriving. This is some sort of like the struggles with what we are talking about. It's not about getting to the end, like we have to cross this river. It's about struggling with these thoughts and continuous like the descent can't be a chaos. Descent can be useful and this multiple thoughts, and it can bring up multiple possibilities. So I'm not very this not a very well-versed thought that I'm struggling with. It's just a thought that's coming up in my mind.
Yeah.
Well, how can we like this divide that's being created out of nostalgia, out of fear, but also like the form of violence that globalization is kind of putting things into boxes and like one person has said recently that everything is about violence. The form of violence can be different. It can be globalization, it can be nationalism, it can be racism and everything. But how it's like putting boxes and yeah, I'm still like struggling with yeah, like the culture paints us, but it also provides the rules and rituals, and people are like social animals. They need those rules and rituals. If you can't, if you break them, you can sort of struggle with your whole life. But yeah, it's just the idea of homecoming, the culture and community. It was just I was struggling. I just thought I should say something about it. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Thank you. Thank you. Sure.
Yesterday, when we were having the workshop with Siddhansha, I remember I remember that Paribartana said, with inclusivity comes discrimination, by giving an example of how he curated an exhibition for the students' Biennale. And then Siddharth added, with light comes shadow, so on and so forth. So I think whenever we're trying to do something, there is a result in some other form. Even if we would like, it's very difficult to achieve 100% success. So I think.
Yeah. Thank you. Rishi, we're at your work. Your work, akin to the winter sun, is fairly different from all the 9 works that we've seen at the exhibit. While a number of works are looking at communities from the outside, how I see your work is that you're looking inwards. It's a quest for finding a sense of belonging for yourself and an extension of finding your own community. Could you share a little on these lines?
All right. I'll just try to keep this brief in the sense that, so yeah, like when I started this project, I was sort of in my early 20s, and I was in design school, and I was in a space where there were people from all parts of India, which is because it was a national institute, there were a lot of people from different parts. And in India, I think people give a lot of importance to the local language that they speak, or their ethnic identity, or their religious identity. And in the process of, resonating with someone else, where they're like, oh, you're from the same place that I'm from, they also exclude someone else who's not, from the same space. So I think I always felt that I wasn't part of any group, like especially in an ethnic group, because my grandparents had shifted from Pakistan into India during the partition, and we sort of lost touch in terms of the language or the place the kind of food they eat or the kind of clothes they wear.
Mhm.
So I always felt that, and yeah, I mean, so I never felt that during my school because I was always throughout my life I was in army schools, and the people around me were also kids of army officers or like people who were in the military or central government jobs. So that wasn't an issue that I faced there, and I never thought about these things. But yeah, I mean, these issues came to the fore when I was in design school. So that became the starting point for the project, and that's how I actually started thinking that maybe there is also like there's this huge, like if you look at the military, like it's one that is very old, one that like it's probably the third largest military in terms of amount of people it employs. So there's a lot of people who have the same sort of subculture that they belong to. So then I started exploring that idea, and it's sort of like since I've been in Kochi in the past 3 days, that has actually that idea has been reinforced because like today morning I met a couple of ladies who were elder than my mom, and they were coming up to me and they were like saying that they resonate with this project because their father was in the military, and this would have been at the time of the independence when their fathers were serving. So yeah, I mean, like it was sort of giving voice to a subculture that hasn't been documented as much, maybe. So yeah, that was the starting point.
Thank you. And I think how you went about from what we discussed, you went about this project is you began visiting places, one from stories that your grandparents would share with you when you were growing up, and the other was going back to places where you grew up. And the third was the objects that I think your parents have been archiving, if I may use that word. And I can't wonder but think that there's a certain association of memory while revisiting these spaces, and very different kind of association with the first 2 layers of documentation, because when you're talking about going to spaces which you only heard about in stories, and when you're going back to spaces that you revisited but in your current present form, how was that experience?
Right. I mean, I could totally relate to what Sebastian was saying in the earlier panel, like the idea of identity is always in flux in that sense, like it's as much in the past as in the future. So I think that's, so documenting what my grandparents have been telling me in their stories, I think in that way, the project is starting way before my time, like I'm documenting the places that they have talked about. It's only coming from their imagination, and also because it's one of the earliest memories. My granddad was still he was 12 years old when partition happened, but my grandmother, and it was mostly her stories, and she passed away a couple of years ago. And it was basically her stories that really had an effect on me. And she was she was maybe 6 or 7 years old. So and she doesn't remember them exactly correctly, and maybe it's her memories are affected by some sort of nostalgia or some sort of I don't know, aspiration or desires, and they have taken the form of memory. So they're unreliable in that way. But so now, I mean, I've documented them, become a part of a shared history in that sense. So yeah, I mean, it starts before me, but coming to the point of going back to the places that I often it was quite alienating in that sense. Like I would go back. I went back to my school. They didn't let me photograph. They they just asked me to get out. You cannot shoot here. This is an army school, and it's not safe. And all the way they're dying British barracks, and probably. I mean, I photographed them in 2018, so some of them are probably not there anymore. So they still were very, strict about not letting me do that. So it wasn't very pleasant all the time, and I couldn't, I think spaces in terms of geography, I think they expand over time. So often when I visited, the spaces seem much smaller than I remember them. All of my schools or my house seem much smaller than what I'd had in mind. And yeah, I mean, some of the experiences were also pleasant in the sense that I found some people who still remembered my dad, even after 20 years, like when I was back in Nepal, and he remembered my brother, and he remembered some incidents where, playing with a golf ball and he broke his tooth and all of that. So yeah, I mean, so I could connect. I didn't even remember him. I didn't even remember there was someone like him, but yeah, through the whole connection. Like, so those things were pleasant, yeah. And yeah, I mean, I forgot what the rest of the question was.
I think you answered it. Thank you. I think Kashish has something to say.
I have a question for you. How did the memories of your father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, like everyone contribute to finding your own identity? Or like, did you find an identity or did you not? Like anything? I just want to understand.
Right. I mean, like, I think, yeah, when I first initially started the project, a lot of people were asking me, is this to gain some sort of solace or, like to get it? I mean, it was in a way that I wanted to. But then when like I started finding out more about, say, Punjab or, like their ethnic identity, I sort of kind of not liking the fact that I was putting myself inside a box. And yeah, I mean, so also, I mean, it did answers amount of questions for me. Also brought me some amount of happiness in the process. But yeah, I mean, like I think it's still an ongoing process, right? Like I shifted to Bombay 3 months ago, and I don't really have a connection with the space. But I think to live in any space, we have changed so many cities now. I think you have to sort of force yourself to like the place. And like even if I go somewhere now, I'm going to Delhi, and someone says something bad about Chamber, part of Bombay I live in, I really defend Chamber, and or I don't really have that much of a connection with Chamber. So I think, yeah, in that sense, yeah, I mean, like it does answer some things, but it's still an ongoing process. So it's not. Yeah, I mean, this could be another project. Just figuring out what identity is now.
Yeah. Thank you. We're going to pause again and see if there's any more questions from the audience or any comments, thoughts, anything that has come up hearing these conversations. Yeah, sure.
Or anybody else, actually. So it's interesting that you speak of technology, you've embraced technology, and you spoke about your own experience, and I'm not sure about others' experience in this space. But now the one thing that everyone is talking about, ChatGPT, and how it's going to, and you mentioned AI, Mithun. So what is the sort of artist's response to what's happening in the world? I mean, do you think that that will also lend a sense of identity to what people are doing? Is it something that feels threatening? Or because we're speaking of memories, we're speaking of nostalgia, we're also talking about how technology can enable, but at the same time, how it can also hinder, like the Welsh language question, for instance. So because there's so much of talk around ChatGPT now, do you think it's I'm not asking a question whether it's good or bad, but how are we going to deal with it? Or do we know at all? Or is it something that is kind of so totally unknown, but we'll end up anyway embracing it like we do with most other things? Just a sort of general question on that.
I totally embrace it. like with everything else. I do have a friend who is well up on this technology, and they've warned me doom and gloom. They actually believe this is the end of the world. But me personally, no, I just see it as another door opening. I've just recently done a project where I document my community by typing in phrases into, I can't remember the name of the software. It's something similar to DALL-E 2, which basically you type in a phrase. So I'll say, someone looking through a window in High Street in Tumble, Gwyndraith Valley. And then that will give me all these impressions, hundreds, thousands if I want. And then I collect these images. So I've basically built at the moment, if Google made Tumble. Remember the advert, Carlin? If Carlin made football, it'd probably be the best in the world. Well, Google just made Tumble, my Welsh village, and it might be the best in the world. I doubt it, but yeah. Yeah.
Very much the same charge was made against photography, but change happens, and photography probably killed off loads of really crap pictorial painting. That's a good thing. So hopefully AI will kill off loads of crap photography.
So yeah, looking at AI art is actually a new project that I've been working on as well. And similar to you, I've been using the generators, and I've kind of been basing it on locations and what 3 words, and sort of using that technology as well within that. And sort of what I'm sort of trying to explore at the moment, I don't have an answer to it, but is that relationship to photography processes and traditional photography processes. And as Gareth mentioned, you know, that used to be the up and coming technology, and sort of, so I'm kind of exploring those relationships, with the relationship between those 2 technologies, and how they connect, how they don't connect. And yeah, I mean, there isn't really an answer at the moment, I don't think. You know, it is a new thing, and like you say, I don't think it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. Like Hugh said, it closes doors, but it also opens a lot of doors, and I think that's really important to keep in mind. So, yeah, I think that's it.
I think this is a very good point to pause for the evening, and unless if there's any questions coming up. Just a reminder, the show is going to go on until the end of the Kochi Biennale. It's at TKM Warehouse. It's called Communities of Choice. There's information about the artists, and if you all want to get in touch, I think we are all okay with that. Yeah. So you'll find their details at the exhibition. Thank you very much for sitting patiently through 2 hours, and we'll see you around. Cheers.